and welcome to our webinar. I believe we'll go ahead and get started. There'll be a few more people joining us as we go along, but I think it's pretty much time to get started with our webinar on working with non-governmental organizations in conservation program delivery. We're pleased to have you joining us today, and we welcome you. And to that welcome, our Executive Director of NASCA, Mike Brown, is going to say a few words this morning. Mike?
Good morning, and thank you, Ray. I'll be brief, but you know we sponsor these educational webinars several times a year, and we share a lot of great information. We're doing something a little different today. Naturally, our state conservation agencies have worked with NGOs to deliver conservation for years. Perhaps we saw a more formalized structure put in place with RCPP that really encourages the work between districts, state agencies, and NGOs even more so. But today we're going to hear from some of the NGOs that our folks have worked with and talk about the projects that they've taken on, either led or been a part of, and find out the real secrets behind how they were successful in working with districts and state agencies and in putting conservation on the ground. So I want to thank all of our guest speakers today. I'm really looking forward to the presentations. And I would also ask that as you wrap up your presentation, if you have any thoughts on a couple of things, I'd appreciate it if you could share them with us. And the first Ray's already mentioned is we've got a new president-elect, and certainly a new and very different administration that will be coming into play beginning next year. What changes do you see in the conservation delivery world as a potential result of that administration change? And the other thing is we're all starting to work on a new farm bill, and I think our members would be curious as to what your organizations would like to see included or excluded into the next farm bill. So folks, I'm very much looking forward to your presentations. Thanks to everyone for dialing in. And Ray, I'll turn it back to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike, and we appreciate those opening comments. A few logistics as we begin our session today. One, all the lines are going to be muted with the participants. The presenters will be unmuted as they give their presentations. And so your questions to the presenters, we welcome them. We want to get them to the presenters via the web. Use the dashboard on your computer, go to the questions area and enter those questions. We're going to get to as many of these questions as we can. We'll probably have just a question or two after a presenter finishes, move to the next presenter, and then we'll stop and have a round of questions for the first three presenters, and then we'll do that again for the second three presenters. This presentation is being recorded so that we can keep it on with the NASCA website. That allows the participants that couldn't make it for whatever reason to get on and hear the webinar later on. Your feedback's welcome. Certainly the kudos, the comments, the recommendations all go to Mike Brown at that email address shown on your screen. So our purpose today is to have a webinar on tips and ideas for working with non-governmental organizations in conservation program delivery. We're going to learn from these 6 different presentations and conservation organization leaders from across the nation as they share how they successfully built partnerships with state conservation agencies, conservation districts, natural resources conservation service, other government entities. And many of these presentations, as we practiced yesterday, we began to realize how many organizations had been brought together in these programs that you're going to hear about today. So you couldn't be more excited to hear from folks from all across the nation about their experiences. And many of our presenters today are the non-government organizations leaders that will be talking with us. Our agenda We'll start with the opening comments, the agenda, the session objective. We're just about through with that, and then we're blessed to have Dane and Becky join us from the Ducks Unlimited and then the Dakota area, the South Dakota, North Dakota area, and beyond. The U.S. Endowment for Sustainable Forestry and Communities. Peter will be with us from South Carolina to talk about some of their program activities. From Minnesota on the shared technical personnel, Jason's joined us, and then we'll stop, have some questions and responses. And then our second round presentations will include American Farmland Trust, and Leif will join us from Washington State, and Pheasants Forever, Jim will join us from the East Coast, and then Pennsylvania's Dirt, Gravel, and Low Volume Roads Program with Trout Unlimited, Roy will join us from Pennsylvania. So that's our lineup today. We'll have two sets of questions and responses, and then close at noon Eastern Time. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, and speakers actually, and it'll be Dane and Becky with Ducks Unlimited. Dane and Becky, let's do a mic check with you.
1, 2, 3.
We're here.
1, 2, 3, Becky and Dane. We're very pleased to have you today, and take it away, please.
All right, we are excited to be here as well. I'm Becky Malum. Public-private partnerships are really the way conservation is done today. We don't have enough resources to do it by ourselves, and our public partners don't either, so we bring those together, and that's what makes conservation happen, and also makes us happy. We're going to talk about our conservation program biologists in our prairie states, but just a couple of notes on the changes that we're expecting. Like everybody else, we're anxiously waiting for the appointment of an Ag Secretary and also an Interior. And our biggest hopes for the Farm Bill is that wetland protections continue that have been so successful. Okay, first a little bit about Ducks Unlimited. We are dedicated to conserving waterfowl habitat, as you can imagine. So we work with landowners to conserve wetlands and grasslands through protection programs, short-term, long-term, restoration, and public-private partnerships. We were founded in 1937. Of course, it was the Dust Bowl era. Very few wetlands, and waterfowl numbers had plummeted. Today, Ducks Unlimited is working in all 50 states. We also have sister organizations in Canada and Mexico, because waterfowl do not know any borders, of course. Since 1937, we've conserved more than 13.6 million acres. We first started out working just in Canada, and then in 1984, in the yellow, you'll see the Great Plains region. And that's, if we can go back to that last slide, and that's where Dane and I work in North Dakota there, those 7 states. And then now we have 4 regional offices, and the red dot is Memphis. That is our national headquarters. On the left, you'll see the little red dots are projects that have happened across the continent. Okay, going to the next. But our focus here today is on nesting habitat, and it's a big focus for Ducks Unlimited. We call it the Duck Factory because upwards to 70% of the waterfowl are produced there, the continent's waterfowl. In this prairie pothole region, that's the red section, and the folks we're talking about today, the conservation program biologists, work in the states of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. A little bit about our conservation program biologists before we talk to Dane Bisey, who is one of our folks. They're working with landowners to achieve goals through conservation. They're coordinating with other agencies, and you can go to the next slide, such as the Natural Resources Conservation Service and other agencies that you folks work with. And also developing innovative state programs, and Dane's going to tell you about some of those, that really help stretch those federal dollars and also add value to those federal programs to make them more attractive and combat the growing loss of habitat. And here's Dane.
Okay, well, thank you, Becky. And as you said, my name is Dane Bisey. I'm a conservation program biologist. Along with Tanner Yu, my counterpart. He covers the eastern portion of North Dakota, and I cover the central to the north central and the northwestern part of North Dakota in the prairie pothole region. So as conservation program biologists, we work with landowners to achieve their operations goals through conservation programs by providing technical assistance on the farm. So whether it's in the field or even at the kitchen table. We found it to be very beneficial to be on site with the producer because oftentimes their main resource concern is only the product of an additional resource concern. These concerns we're addressing in North Dakota are their soil concerns, excess water, livestock, or even wildlife habitat resource concerns. One of the projects we are currently working with that is new in North Dakota is the Working Grasslands Partnership. This partnership program is funded by the Outdoor Heritage Fund. The North Dakota Natural Resources Trust received this grant, and in partnership with Ducks Unlimited, Soil Conservation Districts, Pheasants Forever, and also the Outdoor Heritage Fund. These funds are combating the loss of CRP acres through a working lands program that works for wildlife and landowners. So this program provides voluntary options for landowners to develop their expiring CRP into rotational livestock grazing systems. These program funds provide infrastructure cost share at a 60-40 rate, and also technical assistance is provided through 10-year agreements. Another program we are currently working with in North Dakota that we received from Enbridge is the Eco Footprint Program. It is administered by the Minnesota Association of Resource Conservation and Development. Landowners enrolling in this program receive a 60-40 cost share as well for livestock grazing infrastructure and to restore marginal cropland back to grassland and grazing systems, and it also restores wetlands. This is a priority region for us in the Devil's Lake watershed, primarily because they've been dealing with flooding and reduced commodity prices as many landowners are seeing today. And the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program has been a great partner to work with through this, just by reducing costs of the program and providing additional technical assistance on the ground. So as conservation program biologists, we like to provide landowners with options, whether it's through the Natural Resources Conservation Service programs such as EQIP and the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, through conservation districts. They have their tree planting program. Ducks Unlimited has also provided grass drills to conservation districts so that they can take on the demand of CRP grass seedings, and it's an option for them to do cover crops for landowners in the fall. The Farm Service Agency also has their CRP program. Fish and Wildlife has their grassland easement, wetland easement, and their Partners for Fish and Wildlife program. Pheasants Forever also has a program in North Dakota. It's the pollinator program, which I've worked with producers on, and they're very thankful for that program. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later in the webinar. The North Dakota Game and Fish Department has a pretty unique program. It's called the PLOTS program, Private Lands Open to Sportsmen. And that program provides private landowner rental payments to allow the public to hunt. So I'll tell you a little bit about what Ducks Unlimited can provide to you as agencies and organizations. Ducks Unlimited is an organization that is grounded in science. Our research team works throughout the Prairie Pothole region to monitor waterfowl populations. These provide educational summer job opportunities for students, and they answer any questions we may have about waterfowl. Ducks Unlimited also does grant writing to address conservation needs in these priority areas, such as the Prairie Pothole region here in North Dakota. By having a science team, we are effectively able to determine where these funds provide the greatest benefit to waterfowl. And these grant funds that we receive through these grants provide landowners with cost share to make conservation practices economically feasible. And by building partnerships with agencies and organizations, we are able to make federal and state conservation dollars go further. Since budgets are being cut, it seems more important in today's economy to develop partnerships that make these practices feasible for landowners. Providing partnerships, a lot of guys out there have more experience than I do. Some of you have probably been doing this as long as I've been alive, and being out in the field with people with that kind of experience is very valuable. So with partnerships, we're able to provide more options and a better service to landowners. And the way we see it is if landowners are seeking to improve their operation with wildlife in mind, they deserve nothing but the best service and the best options out there. Another option that Ducks Unlimited has is an engineering team, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And we all know conservation is not cheap, and it can be challenging. So why shouldn't we provide landowners with a wide variety of options to ensure that they're meeting their conservation goals with the best programs out there? And in the meantime, when we're in the field working with these producers, we need to take note of the needs that they have in their operation so that we can develop programs that are grounded in science to build programs for work with landowners in these priority areas. So as you can see on the slide here, our engineering team is able to perform wetland restorations. They can be a great resource in performing these wetland restorations. They're a team who can provide all these project services. So whether it's restoring a half-acre wetland with a ditch plug or establishing a concrete water control structure to better manage water levels on a lake, our engineering team can provide that assistance. So I think that's all I have for you today with that short amount of time we have. But I would like to thank you for your time, and I hope that you now have a better understanding of what Ducks Unlimited, that we not only have fundraising banquets any given time of the year, which some of you have maybe been to, but that we're very active on the ground in these priority areas, working with partners to assist these landowners to meet their operations goals through conservation programs. Thank you very much for your time.
Outstanding, Dane and Becky. Becky, anything that we might have forgotten to mention during the presentation? Go ahead and say it now.
No, just glad to be here, and we would entertain questions when that time comes.
Sounds great. And we're looking at the dashboard, and it's a reminder to all of us, go ahead and enter your questions for not only Dane and Becky, but also any of our presenters, and we'll take those as we go along today. Again, go to the questions dashboard, type in your question, send it to us, and that'll be great. Dane and Becky, thanks so much. You brought that in just right on time, and we appreciate that so much. And our format today is short presentations, but we hope that you'll recontact these folks and with interest of a project or something you might want to get going with Ducks Unlimited in your area. But boy, that's exciting news that's happening in the Dakota area in Montana, and we appreciate your time today. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Peter Stangl from the U.S. Endowment for Sustainable Forestry and Communities. Peter, let's do a mic check, see that you're on today. Hi, Peter, are you on today? All right, 1 second. We had him on. We'll have it back up in just a shake. Hang on with us. Hang on with us. I'll make our technology work for us today. Peter, are you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me, Ray?
Hi, Peter. Yes, we've got you back on again. Thanks so much. So to speak with us about the U.S. Endowment for Sustainable Forestry and Communities activities, and we're looking forward to your presentation, Peter. So fire away, please.
Well, great, Ray. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thanks for this great opportunity. And what I thought I'd do this morning is tell you a little bit about the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities so that you'll better understand how we work, and then talk a little bit about a couple of the partnerships that we have, focusing not so much on the programs themselves, but rather on how the partnerships developed. And I'm hopeful that as a result of today's call, we'll meet some new folks and perhaps have a few new partnerships coming up in the future. So next slide, please. First thing to realize about the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities is that we are a foundation. We give away money, and so in the course of my everyday job, I don't go out and plant trees or talk to forest owners about how to better improve the health of their forests. We give money to other folks to do that. So we're kind of one step removed from the actual implementation of programs, but that gives us a unique perspective. We do both give grants and make other investments to promote forest health, help revitalize forest-rich communities, and also increase markets for forest products. We are the working forest people. We believe that the more products you can generate from forests, the more likely people are to have forests on their property. We generate our funding from a perpetual endowment that comes as a result of a settlement between the U.S. and Canadian governments. $200 million is a lot of money, but we use the earnings from that every year for our program, so have a relatively limited amount to invest each year. And we try and be very focused in what we do. Our goal is to bring about systemic, transformative, and sustainable change. If I could have the next slide, please. All right. So the challenge for us is, how do we bring about systemic, transformative, and sustainable change nationwide on a relatively small budget? And so we're very disciplined with our investments. We tend to invest in a relatively small number of activities, but stick with them so that we can bring about change over the long term. We pride ourselves on taking risks, so we do what others can't or won't. We believe quite strongly that private philanthropy like ours is important for undertaking higher risk projects that, for example, government agencies might not be able to do. And because of our small size, we absolutely depend on partners to get the job done. And so we focus a lot on partnerships and leverage and how we can work with others to bring about the kind of systemic, transformative, and sustainable change we're after. Next slide. This shows you just a little bit of the scope of the partnerships that we have with agencies that you may be familiar with. One you may not know there is a private company called Viva, which is a forest products company. They create pellets out of wood for energy, primarily for the European market, and one of our good private partners. These numbers here talk about the impact of our programs on the ground. This isn't the actual amount of money we or our agency partners have put into it, but instead what our programs will generate over time. But this gives you some idea of the scope of the partnerships that we have and who we're working with. Next slide. One of the first questions that might come to mind for you is, well, why would you want to work with a private foundation, or why would you want to work with a group like the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities? And there are a couple advantages that we bring that may be appealing to you. First of all, our funding is non-federal, and as many of you know, a lot of the federal funding programs out there require a non-federal match, so we can provide that non-federal match. We're also very good at leveraging money, bringing together different groups, kind of stacking dollars from different organizations. We also do a lot of fundraising. I spend more time raising money than I do giving it away, so we like to go out and look for funding for projects. We can be kind of objective in how we look at issues. We can take the 50,000-foot view and try and do what's best for the resource. We have good convening power. As a donor, we're able to bring people together to help identify good solutions. We're fairly nimble in that we have a very small organization. We can move quickly. We don't have long-term budget planning like some agencies do that can restrict you when new opportunities come up. Basically, I make a phone call to the boss and we can get a new project started, so we can move quickly to take advantage of new situations or unplanned opportunities. We have a high risk tolerance. We like to try things that are a little bit risky but that could have a big payoff, and we deliver what we promise. I think one of the best compliments we've had from our partners at Natural Resources Conservation Service is that they told us we do what they were going to do. So how do partnerships start? Well, they begin just on calls just like this one, where we listen to each other and try and better understand what your needs are and how your interests overlap with our interests. And then we spend a lot of time casting lines. We go out and we talk to people, make cold calls with potential partners, try and better understand what they're doing. And for every 3 lines we cast, if we get 1 new partnership, then we feel like we're in pretty good shape. Next slide. Just a couple examples of what we're doing. And again, I won't focus so much on the actual programmatic issues here, but instead on how the partnerships themselves developed. One of the best ones we have is focused on helping African American forest landowners retain their forest lands and better manage them to create a financial asset. This is being done by my colleague Alan McGregor. I know he'd be delighted to tell you more about it. Basically, the issue here is that over the past several decades, the amount of land owned by African American forest owners has diminished from upwards of about 19 million acres down to about 7 million acres. These folks are losing their land often in a way that's very harmful to them financially. And so we stepped out to help lead a program that would stabilize land ownership across generations, help these families develop their forest assets as a way to build family wealth, and retain the forests on the landscape to improve the health of the forests so that they become a strong financial asset. And we do that by identifying a lead organization in a particular region that can create a network and provide forestry and land tenure support to these landowners. Next slide, you're fine there, Ray, go ahead. We often start off in a pilot project mode, so this program was no different. In 2012, we funded pilot projects in 3 states. Based on the success of that endeavor, created 2 new programs this year, so ramping up the program a little bit. We've been a fairly generous supporter and have had terrific support from NRCS and the U.S. Forest Service. Just as an example of how the funding works, for the NRCS program, we and our partners actually applied for Conservation Innovation Grants, Regional Conservation Partnership Program grants. So we're out there trying to raise the money that it takes to do these programs, and have had great success so far. Our colleagues with NRCS at the state level have been key supporters. Across their states, they put up more than $1 million for EQIP funding for some of these socially disadvantaged landowners. The state forestry commissions have been critically important, particularly in devoting some of their staff to provide expertise to landowners for forest management plans. And in one of the new projects in Arkansas this year, the Arkansas Association of Conservation Districts has been operating a revolving loan fund for us to assist some of these limited resource landowners with some of the upfront costs they need to do their projects. So this program has gone from basically start to full speed in about 4 years. We began by reaching out and better understanding what the issues were, identifying key partners like NRCS and the Forest Service, starting a pilot project, and getting underway. A second example that's worth looking at is a brand new one, a partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency focused on helping protect healthy watersheds so that they don't deteriorate and affect water quality. It's a very modest program, about $2 million a year, but scheduled to work for the next 5 years. A little information there in the program if you're interested. Basically what we're doing is providing capacity support to local entities who then go out and work with partners on a community level to protect watersheds that are providing primarily drinking water, but also water for other environmental purposes. And by protecting the watershed, you're also protecting a wide variety of other values, everything from habitat for endangered species, recreational land for hiking, hunting, fishing, a variety of other activities, open space, carbon sequestration, a whole variety of what you consider to be triple bottom line benefits for these communities. And it's all done through partnerships at the local level. We're the ones responsible for coming up with the funding and helping make the projects go. Final slide, please. So just to draw back a little bit to the question that Mike asked in the beginning, what do we think about the new administration? We're very optimistic. We're a very markets-based and markets-focused organization, and we think that that will be probably a big part of the new administration. With regard to the Farm Bill, we're big proponents of any activities that tend to focus funding. So the Regional Conservation Partnership Program we think has been very valuable because it makes a lot of money available for specific tasks, and we're also looking to increase the visibility of forestry programs in the next Farm Bill. That's all I have, Ray.
Well, thanks so much, Peter. I saw or heard the pins just flying across the paper there with notes to give you a call or send you an email. We really appreciate your presentation of the exciting programs and demonstrating the numbers of partners that we can get involved and the leverage that can occur with that. Hang in there with us. We may have some other questions coming up. A reminder to our participants, go ahead and put your questions into the webinar through the questions dashboard. Thanks again, Peter.
Thank you.
My pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Jason Beckler from Minnesota. And Jason's going to speak with us about the Farm Bill Assistance Partnership in Minnesota. Jason, are you on the line?
I am, Ray. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're coming through loud and clear. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the introduction, Ray. As Ray said, my name is Jason Beckler, and I'm a board conservationist for the Minnesota Board and Water Soil Resources, a state agency. And so I'm going to talk to you guys about a 16-year long, can you go back one slide, Ray, real quick?
Sure can, you bet.
Yep. So this presentation is going to talk about a 16-year-long process that Minnesota is using to bring multiple partners, including an NGO, Pheasants Forever in our case, together that have the same goals, with the overall goal of trying to streamline the delivery of conservation programs in the state of Minnesota. And I just want to formally recognize all the partners. When I talk about partners, this is who I'm referring to. Going from left to right on the screen, we've got the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, Pheasants Forever, NRCS, Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, which has been a main funding source for the partnership, and the Minnesota Association of Water Conservation Districts. Next slide, Ray. And so just to kind of give everybody an idea of the footprint of the partnership, every county that's yellow on this map has a Farm Bill assistance staff person working in that county. Right now we have 39 full-time equivalents covering 53 SWCDs or counties. Of that FTE number, 16 of those are Pheasants Forever Farm Bill biologists. The rest of the positions are Soil and Water Conservation District Farm Bill technicians, different titles, but they're doing the same work. There's various reasons where having Pheasants Forever working in that county made sense, and I'll highlight a few of those further on in the presentation. Next slide, Ray. So real quick, just kind of the overall partnership purpose. Basically, what it comes down to is the partnership is working to try and accelerate local SWCD and Pheasants Forever staffing capabilities. Boots on the ground, you hear that a lot, and that's the mission of this partnership, is to get dedicated staff in the counties where they need to be. And they're working with landowners on a variety of projects, and the presentation isn't going to cover all the stuff that they're working on. There's not enough time, but you know, just a few of them. They're busy with the federal farm bill. CRP is probably the biggest workload in the state right now for those folks, but Minnesota had dedicated funding that came along in 2008. That's brought a lot of funding and a lot of additional resources, state funding-wise, to Minnesota, and these folks are working on delivery and getting those dollars put on the ground in the right location to try and achieve some of our overall state resource conservation goals. You know, and so all these funds are available, all these programs are available, and we want to make sure that we're bringing in as many funds to the state of Minnesota for conservation as we possibly can. Mentioned CRP again. CRP is paying $110 million every year in annual landowner payments. And we want to make sure that we continue that strong presence of that program in the state and bringing in as many federal dollars to the state as we possibly can. And if we run out of money, we maybe want to take some of yours if you're not using it. So that's kind of our goal, is we want to be aggressive in getting things delivered. Next slide, please. So partnership priorities. We don't want, what we're doing with these positions isn't just necessarily random acts of conservation. It's very prioritized, targeted, and measurable, everything that we're doing. And so some of the overall state goals that we're working towards with these positions to try and achieve was, you know, a 20% reduction in nitrogen in Minnesota surface waters, 25% reduction of sediment loading in the Minnesota River Basin by 2020. The goal of the partnership is to try and facilitate 30,000 acres annually of vegetative water quality practices. Talking about CRP again, Minnesota has 416,000 acres of CRP that's set to expire in the next 3 years. And we don't have a dedicated workforce out there to work on the nation's largest conservation program in the state, except for these positions. So keeping them employed and working in the priority areas is going to be vitally important maintain the CRP program presence that we have now and to try and expand on it if we want to achieve our water quality and wildlife goals. We're working, spending a lot of time on USDA's honeybee effort and all those good programs. Minnesota itself has a state-funded pollinator program, and Pheasants Forever has been a key partner in that here too. Next slide, please. So I tried to think about how would I illustrate how this partnership is working, and it's probably the best thing I could come up with at the time. We kind of have 4 pillars holding up this partnership. We got federal partners, we got state, we've got local soil and water conservation districts, and then we got our NGO, Pheasants Forever. And what they're holding up is 39 FTEs, and they're all providing a combination of all the partners, a total of $2.5 million a year to keep these people employed and working. And so how this partnership has worked and been so successful over the last 16 years is the partners aren't necessarily entitled to a widget or this activity necessarily. They're all kind of buying into a process of employing people, getting boots on the ground to deliver conservation programs as they're available. And so one month in CRP might be our #1 priority. The next month, based on funding and program availability, we might be working on Minnesota's Reinvest in Minnesota perpetual easements as a top priority. And so these people are able to fluctuate based on what is available at the time. And so having partners that understand how that can vary and how priorities can change, and maybe one month it's a federal priority, the next month it's a state priority, and not having any friction as a result of that is what really makes this partnership a strong partnership. And so how this all works real briefly is every year the Farm Bill Committee, the partners I mentioned in the opening slide, solicit every SWCD, Soil and Water Conservation District in the state of Minnesota, to submit an RFP requesting funds to staff a person to work on the priorities for the Farm Bill Assistance Program. And the committee then takes all these and ranks and scores them based on location. Are they in priority areas for resource protections or improvements? What's the historical performance of that position in that county, and what are the overall goals locally that they have for the position? And so based on those overarching criteria, we make our staffing decisions every year, and if approved, an SWCD receives $65,000. It requires a 10% local cash match, but it's $65,000 for a full-time employee. We do have some counties where the workload isn't as strong, where it would require 2,088 hours of somebody to work on that. So in some counties we might be funding a half-time position, and even some are down as far as a quarter time. So we're able to fluctuate the staffing level with the partnership based on some of the other priorities and the known workload within that county. And so $65,000 per employee, that's how we're coming up to the $2.5 million for 39 full-time employees. Next slide, Larry. And so part of the reason and part of the benefits that we're seeing of having all these partners working towards the same mission is trying to avoid what is on the slide right now, a traffic jam. All the partners, they're working on the same things, and one of the complaints that you hear from landowners from time to time is, I don't know who to work with. I don't know who the point person is. I'm getting the runaround on these programs. Well, by having all the partners involved and having that one person understanding what they're supposed to be working on, they're able to be that guy or that gal for that landowner that landowner can go to and ask questions and get program information. And if they don't have the answer, they know where to point them to get the answer. And that has greatly improved our landowner participation in our voluntary conservation programs. It's just that simple customer service type thought process. And without having all those partners meeting quarterly, coming together, working on a common mission. We would have trucks meeting in the driveway possibly with the same landowner. Someone coming in to talk to them about CRP and then somebody coming in to talk to them about a rim easement. It just creates confusion for them. Next slide. And so NGOs, kind of the purpose of this webinar, you know, we're lucky to have Pheasants Forever as a strong partner with the Farm Bill Assistance Partnership. They've been a great asset to us. And I'm just going to highlight a few things that they bring to the table on our end. It certainly isn't everything, but just some of the main things is having an NGO can greatly simplify the processing of multiple funding sources. So we've got pots of money coming in from state, federal, local, and statewide, the state agency, we'd have to try and figure out processes and agreements and all this other stuff. And having Pheasants Forever involved has really simplified that process. They can come in and say, yep, we'll work with you, we can take your money, here's how we'll do this, and it just goes smooth and continues to move on the way we need it to. Some of the other benefits to highlight with Pheasants Forever, we do have a couple positions that are covering multiple counties. Not a lot, but we do have a few in the state. And a majority of those are Pheasants Forever positions. And part of that has to do with, number one, their efficiency to get things done with the partnership. But also, if we were to have two SWCDs try and work together, they'd have to come up with a shared service agreement, possibly an MOA, you know, agreements on vehicle usage, who's paying for health benefits, making sure time is equally spent with all those, and possibly setting up a joint powers. And it gets intimidating quickly for the local government units when they start looking at everything that needs to be done. Groups like Pheasants Forever in our situation just come in, they have agreement, they get all the partners at the table, and again, it just gets done. You know, some of the other things, you know, Pheasants Forever is great. We do have some SWCDs that aren't capable or don't have the processes involved to try and offer those HR benefits for those staff individuals. You know, and in that situation, that's again something Pheasants Forever can just do. It's just done. They can hire the right people. They bring a brand recognition to the partnership. They help us attract quality staff. We have staff turnover, and that's something I'll highlight in some of the next slides here. But they bring that. People understand Pheasants Forever. They understand their mission. They see that, and they want to be a part of that. And so we benefit from having them involved from a quality staff point of view. Next slide, Ray. So some of the challenges. I've highlighted all the good stuff, but unfortunately it doesn't always, nothing's perfect. We do have a few challenges that we've had to work through with this partnership as a whole. You know, one of them is, and I kind of highlighted as one of our advantages, but it's also a challenge, is a moving target with program availability and program sign-ups and everything else that's going on, and being able to have staff that can go with those changes. And if we have a general CRP sign up next month, we know that we have 39 FTEs that could drop what they're doing and focus on that general sign up. Again, to try and bring as many conservation dollars into the state as we possibly can. And in a lot of situations with existing processes out there, it isn't quite that seamless of a transition from priority to priority, especially with short turnaround times in some situations. And these people are able to take advantage of those opportunities where others simply just have to kind of miss out on them because they don't have time, they're involved in other things. I mentioned staff turnover. These positions on a pay scale wise, we were paying them at an entry-level type pay scale. And so we were attracting quality staff, but most of them were coming in with the right kind of education background, but it was tough to get somebody hired that knew how to write a CRP plan or had JAA. or understood just how government agencies work together. Most of them maybe had a year or two of experience working as an intern outside of college, and so we're bringing in these people and we're having to try and give them as much knowledge and as much training material as possible, try and get them familiar with all the programs and all the eligibility requirements and all the seeding requirements and how to manage grasslands and all these things, how to address sediment issues. And it's a pretty steep learning curve. And so it takes a good year or so for these folks to get comfortable and to build that trust with the landowners in the county that they're working in. But then because we're not paying them at a high enough rate, they get that experience, the good people shine through this process, and the state and federal agencies kind of, they employ them. They take them away from the partnership, which is good for them. That's how this should go. They should be transitioning, but we're losing good people after 2 or 3 years of experience, and then we're having to start over in those counties and try and bring in somebody new and get them up to speed. And it can create some confusion with landowners. This last year, we did increase our allocation to the $65,000. Before, it was $50,000 for our full-time employees through the partnership. Now it's $65,000 to try and address that, to have an attractive pay scale for these people, to try and keep them around as long as we possibly can. A lot of our funding is soft funding for the partnership, meaning it's grants, which creates a little restlessness with some of the employees. They want to start families, they've got goals, ambitions in life, and they want to know that they have a stable job to go along with that. And kind of going on 2 years, every 2 years, getting the money together, hopefully grants come through. That also kind of feeds into good staff wanting to seek employment elsewhere to try and find some stable funding. Office space and vehicle usage is becoming an increasing issue in the state, with agreements, trying to work with our federal partners, making sure that they have access to a vehicle so they can be out in the field doing this work, and making sure there's enough vehicles in the parking lot, making sure they have access to a USDA NRCS computer system with toolkit so that these folks can be writing CRP plans, is becoming more and more of an issue, and budgets are getting tighter and tighter. And so we're having to try and work through that process right now to figure out exactly how we're going to ensure all the staff have access to the programs and the vehicles that they need to be successful. And we're also trying to work on and finalize an organized training structure. The new staff turnover that I mentioned earlier, we need to try and streamline our education process so that these new people can get up and running and confident what they're doing as quickly as possible. Because we might only have them for 3, maybe 5 years before, like I mentioned earlier, they go on to greener pastures somewhere else. Next slide, Ray. And so just to kind of, is the partnership working? Yeah, it's working, and I think it's quite successful in my opinion. This graph just shows how many acres the Farm Bill assistance people have impacted every year. And we got peaks and valleys, and a lot of that is due to program availability. Big general CRP sign-offs, a CREP is in there. All those things kind of plays into how successful we can be as a partnership with impacted acres. But through the life of the partnership, as you can see on the graph there, we've impacted 636,000 acres, and that's not a small number. And so we're averaging about 35,000 acres a year with the partnership, which is 5,000 more than our annual goal of 30,000 acres. So we're always exceeding the goals and expectations that we set for these people. And a lot of that has to do with our ability to attract good quality staff. Next slide, Ray. And so the next steps for the partnership, the map that you see on the right-hand side there, the red boundary, Minnesota is put in for a CREP 3. And the red boundary outlines if we do get funded for a CREP 3, where that would go on in the state, which is right in the core of where we have our Farm Bill assistance staff now, with a few gaps in there with counties that don't have somebody. And so if everything goes smoothly, if we get a CREP 3 in the state, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to employ an additional 25 employees and how we're going to recruit quality staff, where we're going to get office space for these individuals, how are we going to make sure they got vehicle access, how are we going to train all these folks that they're able to write CRP plans and work on perpetual easements, and who's going to make sure they got a computer, and are they going to have access to the federal programs that they need. Those are all things that we need to get figured out here if we get good news on our CREP 3 proposal. And so that's going to take some ingenuity, it's going to take partners, it's going to take everybody working together to make that a reality, rather than everybody trying to work individually. And so it makes sense for all this to be done under the Farm Bill Assistance Partnership model. So with that, that's my presentation. Thank you, Ray. On the next slide, that has my contact information. I'm more than happy to answer any questions anybody might have on the partnership, or if you want me to go in more detail on all the good stuff these folks are working on, I'm more than happy to do that as well. Thank you, Ray.
Yeah, and thank you, Jason. Very much appreciated. Quite an exciting program. Let's move to questions that we've received from the participants. And our first question is going to be directed at Dane and Becky. Dane and Becky, are you with us?
We are.
Interestingly enough, one of the speakers spoke about coordinating the work that's going on for your, how do you coordinate your work with the local conservation districts to eliminate duplicative efforts with the landowners? And I think it was Jason that was speaking to that just a few minutes ago. Did you frame a memorandum of understanding or an agreement around this work, or is the coordination more informal in nature?
So the coordination with the conservation program biologists, what we do is on the ground through Ducks Unlimited. We are not in an NRCS office. We are out on the ground working with landowners and receiving calls from them landowners. And we're kind of a one-stop shop where we can talk to them about their conservation objectives, and then having knowledge about NRCS's, the conservation districts, fish and wildlife programs. We work with them through the application process and anything else that is needed in addressing their conservation objectives.
So you know about all of the other programs that when the producer says, I want to do this, that, or the other, you can help guide them to the right contact person then?
Yep, so we coordinate with FSA, NRCS, Game and Fish, continually receiving updates on what programs are out there and what options are available to producers.
No real formal signed agreement on this at all. Do you just do it, huh?
Yep, we're kind of just on the ground. We're more of like a boots on the ground approach to conservation. Instead of being in the offices doing the work on the plans, we are out there working with them so that they can have a better understanding when they do go into the NRCS office, or when they go in to look at what CRP they want to work with. They can go into the office with the knowledge of what CRP applies to their operation, because there's different requirements for wetland ratios that you need, different priority areas that apply to different CRP practices, and that's what we can assist with the landowner. And when they go into the office, it can be just that much simpler for the office to work with them.
Sure. Hey, Jason, while we're on this, it seemed to me that you mentioned this in a different way, that it was the advantage that you had in working with the folks there, your non-government organizations, allowing you not to have to go into a lot of agreements and a lot of joint powers things like that. Speak to that, please.
Yeah, it kind of gets back to the slide on trying to streamline the process and make things as easy as we can locally to just do good conservation work. Kind of how we used to do conservation work. And so, Pheasants Forever brings that adaptability to be efficient in some of those areas, to bring funding that maybe the state doesn't have the process of handling or dealing with, or even the federal government. You know, so Pheasants Forever is a great partner in that respect. You know, the one thing I will say though real quick, you know, with the overall partnership for the last 15 years, all the partners that I talked about on the beginning slide, it was done under a handshake. There was nothing formally written down. It was just kind of like, yep, this is all good. We're all going to work together. We're going to stay up to date, and just kind of communicate through the points for each agency on how we want to proceed as a partnership. And it worked great. This last year, we did formalize an MOA with all the partners, and it wasn't to fix anything that was going wrong. It was just we had some new folks, and we just felt like it was time to try and at least formalize the process a little bit more so that everybody that was possibly new coming into this partnership really understood everybody's roles and responsibilities. But it didn't change the overall mission of the partnership. It just kind of gave it some framework.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Dane and Becky. Another question coming in for Ducks Unlimited. Does DU have similar or same programs in Montana as you mentioned in North Dakota? And I think, Becky, you mentioned this a bit, service area.
Right. So we also have a conservation program biologist in Montana, and we have them in South Dakota, too.
Available. If they contacted you, then they could get those names of those folks and get a sense of how to reach them, huh?
You bet. And, you know, just call the number that Dane got, or Google us. You can find us out there too, or look on our website. We have a conservation program biologist page for North Dakota, so you could Google that and find us there.
Okay, excellent. Does the oil well tracking expansions in North Dakota adversely affect any of the prairie pothole wetlands? Can you give us a little insight on that? Asked one of our participants.
Interesting question. Our research team right now is currently doing research in the Bakken region, doing research on prairie pothole and the waterfowl's productivity study, and it's looking at the abundance of broods in relation to oil and gas wells versus native sites to give us an idea of our conservation priority areas going forward if oil production is having an influence on those waterfowl populations. So that is something we are currently working on.
And again, Dane, if someone wanted more information on that, they could get a hold of you maybe, and you'd shoot them in the right direction, huh? The researchers and things.
That is correct.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Peter, are you still on the line, Peter?
I am.
There was a question coming in via the chat, and it was about the relationship with the National Association of State Foresters in your discussions and your work in the endowment. Done any work with those folks? It's a counterpart to our conservation state organizations or agencies. National Association of State Foresters.
We have it. We're both the National Association of State Foresters as well as the individual foresters in each state. So we tend to be more active at the state level. One example of that from the slides I showed was that the state foresters have been very involved with the African American Forest Land Retention Program. We've also reached out to them to try and capitalize on some of the potential funding from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill a few years ago to generate some funding for forests along the Gulf and the Gulf states. But yeah, we do try and coordinate with the national associations as a way to better understand what their needs and priorities are and to identify potential overlaps and see how we can collaborate.
Appreciate that, Peter. And kind of a related question, but what do you see as the future of the U.S. Forest Service state and private forestry program as you kind of look to the future now?
Well, I'm not a good person to ask because I don't work as closely with them as do some of my colleagues like Carlton and Michael Gergen, but they have been a key partner for us, and we would anticipate that they would continue to be that way. So I can't speculate on how they'll be changing or adapting in the future. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I'm always reminded when we have this diversity of partners on the phone and in our webinar how powerful all of us working together is and is going to be as we move to the future. So I suppose that's our answer, isn't it? How well can we collaborate on these things and make things happen together rather than separately?
Absolutely.
And each of the contacts that each of the speakers has represents a power cluster, you might say, of contacts and knowledgeable people and people that support our programs, collectively our programs. Very, very exciting. I'm just so excited to hear from these first three speakers. What I'll do now, make a last call here for more questions. Please use your dashboard, send in those questions, and we'll take these as they come in. But I want to just reach out and thank Dane and Becky. We're going to mute you here in a little bit and pull you back if we have more questions, so don't leave us. But thanks so much, Dane and Becky, for your presentation.
You bet.
I want to thank Peter for your presentation. Thanks so much, Peter, and we've learned so much from these three presentations. Peter, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
And Jason, I want to thank you also. What a marvelous program. I think there's Conservation District people on the line that all they're saying is we want one of those, just like you built in Minnesota.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to present, Ray, and if anybody has questions, again, just reach out and we can show you exactly how we work with our LGUs through that process.
Appreciate that, Jason. We're going to go to our next round of speakers then, and let me just call on Leif. Leif, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you just fine. And Jim, call on you, and just to make sure our connections are working again.
Yep, hear you loud and clear.
Hi, Jim. And then Roy from Pennsylvania, are you on the line? Roy, have we got you on the line? All right, we'll come back to Roy in just a bit. So thanks so much again for the first three presentations. Our second round of presentations will include American Farmland Trust. Leif Fexen is with us today. Pheasants Forever, Jim Engels is with us today. And our Pennsylvania Dirt, Gravel, and Low Volume Roads program with Trout Unlimited, Roy Richardson, will be joining us. So it's my pleasure to introduce Leif Fexen. Leif, please.
Yeah, so I work for the American Farmland Trust, and for those of you who don't know who we are, national organization, got our start doing farmland preservation, so actually owning easements, purchasing development rights off of farmers, off of farmland. Now we no longer do easements, and we're more of an advocacy, policy, and like a piloting projects type of an organization. And we like to think that we have three primary legs to our programmatic stool, and the first one is still that farmland preservation component, so ag easements, transfer development rights, growth management act, that kind of stuff. The second leg is keeping farmers on the land, so that's a lot of education, succession planning, financial planning, women in ag, that kind of stuff. And then the third leg, and this is where I spend most of my focus, and that's kind of ag and the environment. So sound farming practices, how can we add value, or how can we add recognizable value to farmers, for farming. And so that's where environmental markets come in, ecosystem services, and then just in general making sure that agriculture isn't identified as a negative land use types. So I myself came out of the conservation district world, and Ray, we can go to the next slide now.
Right.
And that experience has been extremely valuable as we've started partnering. As we've been partnering out here in the Pacific Northwest and kind of around the country. One of the projects I'm neck deep in right now is a large coordinated investment where NRCS is RCPP funding is funding a good chunk of it. Fairly complicated, and it requires a lot of different strengths. And I always like to show this slide, and then if Ray, you want to go to the next one when I'm talking about this project, in that it's a great example of the value of partnering, in that you're playing to different groups and different folks' strengths. And so you kind of have American Farmland Trust over here grinding through some of the red tape and making the sausage essentially, and that allows the conservation district to really focus on owning and managing and providing a really great experience for the landowners. And one of the previous talks talked about, you know, the value in having one person come onto that farm or onto that forest and talk about all the different programs that are available to them versus 8 different people coming out selling 8 different programs. So, and that all leads to the next slide there, Rick. That all leads to synergy. I was actually looking for a quote where, you know, I thought it was an old proverb or something about, you know, how the value of the sum of the partnership is greater than the sum of the individuals, and there's actually one single word that's defined exactly as that, and that's synergy. I knew what synergy meant, but I didn't realize that little proverb was in there, and that's ultimately what we get out of the partnerships that we have both here in the Pacific Northwest and across the country. Next slide. And so going back to that example of the coordinated investment we're running, you know, both the conservation district and AFT brought totally different things to the table. And at the end of the day, AFT doesn't necessarily want to get specifically into the business of providing, you know, every day in, day out technical assistance to landowners. We want to kind of stay a little bit more on the edge of innovation, and then also look at things that go regional or across country. And so this was really viewed as a pilot project. We did the majority of the grant writing. We ironed out all the policy details, trying to get, you know, federal, state, local, nonprofit, and donation dollars to all speak to each other and line up with their policies. And you wouldn't believe how hard it was to get them to line up with their reporting requirements and their, you know, all that fun stuff. And then we acted as an aggregator of those funds, so that you know, we essentially took 8 different funding sources, and we cut one check to the conservation district for the work that they were doing with landowners. And that really allowed the conservation district to focus on providing a good experience for the landowners and a good taste in their mouth, and you know, an efficient and effective rollout of those dollars to get the biggest bang for our buck. And I actually called my partner there at King City. I was like, hey, you know, I'm giving this webinar. What do you think of this? And I ran her through the slides, and she's like, well, and the other benefit to working with you guys always bring snacks. So if you're looking for somebody to bring snacks to meetings, you should call up American Farmland Trust, I guess. Yeah, and so taking a step out, looking at that bigger picture, you know, the benefits of partnering with a national organization, like a lot of the ones you've heard from today, you know, we've got national experts. So the folks that were there for the original, you know, water quality trading program and ironing out those kinks are on our team. We've got experts kind of hidden and tucked away in all corners of the country. we focus on innovation. We focus on assessments as well. This is a picture of our farming on the edge. So that's a map of where the highest at-risk farmland is in the country. Our headquarters is in DC, and the huge benefit that we found being one of the in that first round of RCPP projects was that as we started running into issues and policies with NRCS or the other organizations, I made one phone call to my boss, John Larson, who used to be with NACD. He would literally walk the 2 blocks down the street and go and talk to the director at NRCS. And so having that fairly streamlined connection to folks that can quickly make decisions in DC, I think is a great asset that we bring to the table. We focus on the Farm Bill. We're gearing up for that right now, and then also we have funding to engage in the state and local level kind of policies and regulations that can potentially make or break getting conservation on the ground. And we're a non-profit, so going back, we don't necessarily have to go through a whole bunch of levels of bureaucracy to make change. So, next slide. So that being said, we have learned some lessons through a lot of our partnerships. Define the roles right off the bat. Make sure you know who's doing what. It does add a layer of management, so make sure that you're being as efficient and effective with that layer of management as you possibly can. Engage early. That means, especially in the grant writing process, talk to those grant funders that about what you're trying to do. If you're bringing multiple sources of funding together, or if you're trying to bring multiple organizations together, just so that they're very clear and you understand the rules. And then I call it onboarding partner-in-laws. And so a lot of times when you add like an American Farmland Trust, the King Conservation District ends up in a way partnering with folks that they may not typically partner with or haven't partnered with in the past. And so being very clear about how the relationships are set up and who's doing what and what organizations are in bed with what organizations. So that I think is my last context slide. It's going to what do I think is going to happen in the next in the next 4 years. Boy, who knows? I don't think anybody can accurately predict what's going to come of this. But we had a real great conference call internally, and our new executive director, John Piatti, he was actually very inspirational in that, like, he pointed out the fact that if a lot of our regulations and our environmental protections do get pulled back, conservation districts, the organizations that are on this panel, American Farmland Trust, we're at a really good point in the map in that we bridge that gap between farmers and focusing on producing food and consumers and eating food that's healthy for them and wanting to know that the food that they're eating is healthy for the environment. So, hopefully our system is robust enough that it doesn't swing or change too much. But, if it does, I think it could be an opportunity for all of us on this call to step up. As far as Farm Bill, obviously we get fairly engaged with funding for purchasing of development rights and farmland protection. We also get engaged on kind of all the standard programs that get cost share funding onto the ground, so EQIP, RCPP, all those things. So one of the big things that I'm going to be pushing for is a little bit of reform to the EQIP program to try and get it easier and more effective for small farms. So anyway, that's all I got.
Leif, thanks so much. Very, very good. And you even drew in the last 2 questions and still brought it in on time. So thanks, Leif, for your preparation and your presentation today. Hang on the line with us. We will have some questions, I'm sure, that are going to be entered by our folks, by our participants in the dashboard of their area there where they could ask some questions. Thanks so much, Leif. Pleased to introduce our next presenter today from Pheasants Forever. Jim is joining us and be speaking about Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, Partners in Conservation Program Delivery. Are you on the line, Jim?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
You bet. Coming through fine.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and I really appreciate this position on the agenda to kind of tie in a lot of the things that were already talked about today. So to be additive to that and echo those comments that are made, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing on a national basis, maybe multi-state or regional. And I kind of start off with, I mean, I am the Director of Governmental Affairs for PF, which might not seem like the right fit, although we can certainly start talking Farm Bill here during the question period. But I did start out 15 years ago as a regional biologist with Pheasants Forever. And then during that time, I also helped launch our Quail Forever sister organization in the southeastern U.S. I was our first national coordinator of our Farm Bill biologist program. I did that for 5 years. And then in 2012, I jumped over to governmental affairs to work on the 14 Farm Bill. So I spend a lot of time working on state and federal policy, but I'm also very much grounded in working on the ground stuff as well. So next slide, please, Ray. So basically the mission of Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, we're dedicated to the conservation of pheasants, quail, and other wildlife through habitat improvements, public awareness, education, and land management policies and programs. And Ray, are you seeing slides on your end, or is it just my end that's slow?
It's just a slow connection there for just this little bit here. Should be coming up, let's hope any time now. So, there we go.
All right.
Got it.
So, you know, what we're looking for is any ability to accelerate our mission and to be able to deliver each of those pieces. And there's no question that we can do that through the partnerships that we've heard here today. And really looking at the traditional partnerships that we've had for maybe 20 or 30 years. Go ahead to the next slide too, there, Ray.
All right.
And then, but also look for new opportunities and new and innovative partnerships with folks that maybe haven't been engaged on conservation policy as much. So really the core, the heart and soul of our organization are those local chapter volunteers and members that are putting on fundraisers, selling those raffle tickets, getting sponsorships at that local level, and raising those funds there that we can use to match and leverage for the mission. But with our chapters, the money is retained by the local committee, and they get to decide how to spend it. So their job isn't done after the banquet. They go out and find projects to work on throughout the year and really focus on that county and community basis. So as I mentioned, we were started in 1982. We were quickly recognized as a habitat organization. Go ahead and hit that graphic again, Ray.
All right.
And really some of the first examples of what we did, and somebody mentioned that today, is that the conservation districts and the local Pheasants Forever chapter, as well as maybe the DNR, helped purchase those first no-till drills and got them out there on the landscape to get those installed. And we can't forget the landowner there in the back that signed up for this program. And really the two critical agencies that aren't included on this slide would be the NRCS and FSA, or ASCS back in the day, as some of those early partnerships. So with Pheasants Forever, and the other thing to mention too is the first 20 years of our organization, all of the mission was being delivered by those chapters up until the early 2000s. And here's kind of a chapter map. We've got about 600 Pheasants Forever chapters and about 150 Quail Forever chapters throughout the country. And this is kind of the footprint. Go ahead to the next slide, Ray. And again, we're county-based. Some chapters may be covering multi-counties, and we have sometimes more than one chapter within a county if it's in a highly populated or metro area. So we've kind of got the country split up in 4 different regions, and we have regional representatives that work with those local chapters to raise money and come up with some ideas on how to spend it. And then we have directors in 4 of those regions as well. Next slide. And they're all working together to deliver that. So starting in the early 2000s, we started to develop the Farm Bill Biologist Program as one example, and some of our habitat specialists. The first 4 Farm Bill biologists were in South Dakota in 2003, And then that has expanded to over 120 positions of just those types. And they work on conservation program delivery and mostly farm bill programs, but some state-specific stuff or county initiatives. We have some state coordinators and some coordinating biologists as an example that help work with that. And we're working with all those partners in those states that make sense. Some of the more interesting ones here is that we have some positions there in Pennsylvania that are working on public access. And then we also have some foresters there. We just hired a forester in South Carolina as one, and then some new positions in Indiana and Montana here just in the last year or so. So to talk a little bit about some of the innovative projects that we've worked on, in Nebraska, we had the Habitat Share program, and the concept behind this was that there weren't enough FTEs or enough equipment to get work done on public areas. And so we, in this case, we're using Pittman-Robertson funds that the states have available to them. We're going out, we're helping to find the match. Maybe that chapter helps provide the match for that project. And this kind of depicts here that we're removing some cedar that's going to make that grassland better for the birds in that landscape. So just an example there. Next slide, please, Ray. And just one mention on that Nebraska partnership. We've done 430 projects on over 20,000 acres in a relatively short period of time. So that helps get the work done when maybe the ability of the agency there to get it done. So the next example here is out more in the west. This is a project example in Idaho where we're partnering with Idaho Fish and Game and BLM. And the plan is to try to clear, go ahead and hit the graphic there,
All right.
to clear 70,000 acres of pinyon juniper to make it more beneficial from a grazing standpoint and rangeland standpoint, but also for the sage grouse. And, you know, I've mentioned a couple things here about where the positions are across the country, and it really mirrors where the working lands for wildlife is with NRCS, as well as that need that was mentioned earlier about delivering CRP, whether it's the general sign-up or we're delivering a large amount of acres at one time, or the continuous that are more targeted. And we're putting folks on the ground to be able to do that. Next slide. And overall, nationwide, we have over 300 agreements with agencies, organizations, foundations. Sometimes the agreement is with our own chapter. Say it's a land acquisition, and the chapter is pledging a certain amount of money to be able to purchase that piece of property. Just with the sage grouse initiative, I believe I know there's over 50 partners, and this is just an example of some of those partners that are engaged. And we are kind of that point person or the point organization to funnel all that money in, that state, federal, local foundation, and then get it out to all the partners. So there's about 25 sage grouse biologist or range comm positions out there, and so that's how we make that work. Next slide. We also have and have always had a very core youth education program. It kind of started with the Leopold Education Project that we ran for 20 years, but we've also shifted into, and again, we've had like mentor youth hunts or shooting sports or outdoor skills days, and last year alone, we had about 2,500 events with 147,000 kids and about 50,000 adults that were engaged in that. But one of the things that we've been able to add some staff and some partnerships on is looking at these pollinator projects, and we're doing pollinator projects with school groups, with counties. We're doing stuff on roadsides, right-of-ways, parks, and it gets the kids engaged, you know, in the outdoors and keeping them connected with our natural resources. One of the new things that we just got engaged in about 18 months ago is precision ag and precision conservation side of things. And this first partnership in Iowa that was signed just over a year ago is a partnership between NRCS, Heartland Co-op, Ag Solver, which is a precision ag company based in Iowa, and Pheasants Forever. And we're basically looking at these opportunities, and the best thing the best example I can give is if you have a 100-acre field that you're trying to produce a crop on, and each acre is a franchise of a 100-acre business, you better be sure that each acre is making you money. And sometimes there's other options that you can do, from crop rotations to conservation, to make that happen. Next graphic there, Ray.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have currently 2 precision ag specialists, one in Minnesota and one in Iowa, that are on the ground as part of that partnership. So they are a Pheasants Forever employee, but they're working for those co-ops, or they're working in those counties. And the co-ops and some of those folks are looking at it as value added for their customers. So we're really looking at the opportunity to be able to expand that where it's needed. Next slide. One of the projects that I was personally involved with here, I live in Northwest Ohio, still here, and Ohio EPA approached us on doing a project, and really they wanted to get some buffers planted and some pollinator work done. And you can see here, this is in the Lake Erie watershed, so these are CREP buffers that are going to go in. And then that wood lot in the lower corner is a CP33 quail buffer on that side. And we're looking at this 150-acre field. It's intensively tiled, systematically tiled. So we're looking to do some edge of field monitoring. But the point of this is EPA was originally looking to plant about 10 acres of grass habitat, and then we ended up running the whole project. We got it done a year ahead of schedule. We're going to get a saturated buffer in there. We're capturing an estimated 6 to 7 million gallons of water and then re-irrigating back on the field. And it's all to try to work on some of these Lake Erie issues. But here's a win-win situation for us, and something that, you know, we just sat down and started brainstorming, and it made a good fit for us. Next slide. So again, just looking for non-traditional partners. We're going to work with a local tech college to help with the monitoring. Here we're going to do some sampling with insects and maybe a little some bird counts out there as well. This is the same producer that's on a neighboring farm, and you can see that they've already put in a little wetland in that odd area. They've got a buffer along that ditch in the background, and this producer's been doing cover crops for about 10 years in the watershed and on their operation. And they also are doing an analysis of their operation using the ag solver and looking at the return on investment for you know, what their operation can do. So next slide, and I think that pretty much concludes it here. So you know, just one thing I'd like to say is that each state is so different. You know, each county, each region can be so different, and you kind of have to look at it that way. Like some of the questions earlier about, you know, you've got the districts and you have you know, the NGOs and everybody working together, and I think that that's what we all can do is you know, sit down, come up with a plan if it makes sense, and in some cases with the Farm Bill partnership, like Jason mentioned in Minnesota, it makes sense for the district to have that employee in their office. Where we're covering maybe 2 or 3 counties because of the workload, it makes sense for Pheasants Forever or another entity. So you know, happy to take any questions. You can reach out to me, and I can certainly get you in contact with the right person out there in that region and in your states.
Thanks, Jim. Let's take on your quick thoughts about the changes with the new administration and you know, forecasting that new Farm Bill, what pheasants and quail are looking at regarding some inclusion in the new Farm Bill.
Well, for the election last week, I was actually pheasant hunting in Northwest Iowa, so it was a pretty good place to be. My colleagues and I were intently, of course, watching the elections, but also really watching what was happening on the Senate and the House side. And, you know, of course, that's where the Farm Bill is going to be written, and really paying attention to what committee changes might happen there, and then, you know, move that forward. Very concerned about the CRP cap and the amount of demand that we saw in the last general sign-up, as well as for our continuous practices. So we might not be able to do those CREP programs or the pollinator, those types of things, and have that out there. We envision a higher demand, and we're probably going to see that. The other concern would be just the baseline funding and how moving forward, how are we going to be able to fund an additional acreage of CRP or an increase in EQIP or RCPP or any of those things that may happen out there.
Well, thanks so much, Jim, for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you and the other presenters throughout the year and in the future. Hang in here with us. We'll have some questions in just a bit. So let me do a mic test with Roy Richardson. Roy, are you with us? We'll try one more time. Roy Richardson? Roy will be joining us shortly, I hope. Roy, we may have to have you phone in using the audio of the telephone if the computer's not working for us, or perhaps we've hit a mute button here on the computer. We need to unmute. Roy, trying one more time. Roy Richardson, have you joined us? Well, we're hoping Roy can join us. He'll work on the phone connection there. In the meantime, one of the questions that came in that I'd like to pose to at least Leif and to Jim, what advantages do you see in working the opposite side? And working with the conservation districts, the state conservation agencies, your state and federal partners. Can you give us an insight as to what you're seeing and advantages and benefits?
Sure, this is Jim. I can go first. And like I said, where it makes sense, we want to build the capacity to effectively deliver Farm Bill conservation and really all conservation out there. And so there are instances where we've been able to pass on those positions to become maybe a full-time position with that district or with a state agency or even a federal agency. So we've had Farm Bill biologists that I know that have worked into NRCS or U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and that's some of the benefits that I see. But it's really trying to figure that out, at that county level or at that state level, and making it best work for everybody.
The synergy that Leif talked about is pretty apparent, and it's incredible to be able to use the non-government side of things for getting conservation work done, or the state or local government side of things when that works better. But to have both really gives you quite an advantage. I'm going to come back to that question because I think Roy just joined us. Roy, did you join us?
Yeah, I'm on the phone line now, so can you hear me?
You betcha. We're going to find a good way to get you on there. So Roy, fire away, please.
Okay, yeah, I was, the mic was working pretty good, but I don't know what the deal was. I just couldn't quite get you guys to hear me on the headset, so.
No worries. Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, I was asked to give a talk about some of the non-government work that organizations that help our program here in Pennsylvania. I'm the program coordinator for the Pennsylvania's Dirt, Gravel, and Low Volume Road Program. I thought what I'd do is just take a minute and just give you just a thumbnail sketch of what that program is here in Pennsylvania, and we work a lot with Trout Unlimited, and I'll give you a little idea of how Trout Unlimited has helped us. But for the next slide, the purpose of the Dirt and Gravel program here in Pennsylvania, we have a program that's currently funded at about $28 million a year through the State Conservation Commission. We take those funds and allocate it to the local conservation districts. The conservation districts, in turn, fund environmentally sensitive road maintenance projects with local townships and municipalities. The purpose of the program really is to reduce the environmental impacts of road maintenance activities. In the law that was written to fund the program, the purpose is to fund safe, efficient, and environmentally sound maintenance. So that's what we do. We try to make better roads, which gives us cleaner streams. We have, in order to qualify to apply for funds, the townships have to take a 2-day training course called Environmentally Sensitive Maintenance, and we actually have one of those going on today up in State College. But just to give you an idea, the next slide there, yeah, just to give you just a quick idea in a few slides what environmentally sensitive maintenance is. This picture here would just be an indication of what maybe a natural drainage system might look like. You can see where runoff would flow down, sheet flow into a stream. Over on the right side of the photo, you can see where some of that runoff might infiltrate into the ground and recharge the aquifers, but that's pretty much what we're talking about as far as a natural drainage system. Now, at the next slide, as you get into human activities, road construction, road maintenance activities, that interrupts that natural drainage system. So you can see there on the left for the cars driving down the road, road maintenance activities kind of collects the drainage and concentrates it. And so now instead of having more sheet flow, more concentrated flow, which increases erosion, increases flooding. As you're over there on the right-hand side of the screen, we can also, with our activities, disrupt the infiltration, and that's the purpose of our program, is to actually restore it to a more natural drainage system. The next slide. This was actually a study that was done by Cornell University, but what we have here, there's a watershed delineated there, and you can see the red lines in the picture is a road ditch. The yellow fill area is the drainage area delineated, by the road ditch. And so really some of these watersheds that we have, over a quarter of the area, is drained by road ditches directly into the stream. So that's basically, in a nutshell, we're trying to address those issues. With the next slide, what we would do, if you recall the first slide that we had, this slide here has the addition of additional drainage features to divide the drainage, to provide more of an opportunity for sheet flow after the road, and trying to disperse the drainage. It will just give us, trying to return it not exactly to the natural drainage system, but it get it more towards the normal system. So that's what we have there. That's pretty much the purpose of the program. It's been around in the Commonwealth for a while. I'll give you a little idea of the program history. The next slide was actually brought into law in 1997. Wait for the slide to catch up here. So in 1997, the first low-volume road maintenance bill was passed, and I know you can't read that slide, but basically it funded the program at a level of $4 million a year, and also provided an additional $1 million for the Department of DCNR forestry, basically, for some of their state forest roads. It was then in 2013 the bill was revisited, and the funding was increased. For us, it was increased from $4 million to $28 million. For DCNR, it was increased from $1 million to $7 million, and they also added a low-volume road component to the program. So basically, we've grown from a $4 million program up to a $28 million program over the last 20 years. So that's a little bit of the history and the purpose of our program. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Trout Unlimited involvement, and really it's a story of Trout Unlimited, but it's also a bit of a story about how one person can affect things so much. And this Bud Byron was a fellow. He was a Trout Unlimited member and an avid trout fisherman. And back in 1991, he was fishing in Potter County, which is in the northern part of the state, borders the New York line. But he was up there fishing on one of his favorite trout streams, and a big storm rolled in, and the stream immediately clotted up with thick sediment, and Bud was pretty upset about it. And so he got out of the creek and he hopped up in his truck, and he was going to drive up the road, and he was going to find the source of this pollution. And just thinking it was probably going to be from a logging operation or a gas well, or maybe an ag operation of some sort. But as he drove up the road, he couldn't find anything. And it finally dawned on him that all of the sediment losses was coming from the dirt road he was driving on. And so he was, Bud was a pretty well-respected guy up there, and a very determined guy. And so when he got home, he called everyone he could think of that would have an interest in protecting the streams. And as a result, he had a multidisciplinary task force that he formed to study this problem. And you can see all the logos of all the agencies there that were in the initial task force. The next slide. So what Trout Unlimited did there initially, they set up volunteers, and they monitored pollution sites. They actually went out and looked at 900 individual sites in high quality and exceptional value watersheds. They had a standard scorecard that they used, and they put all the data in a computer system, which back then it involved filling out little punch cards in the old computers. And that's what they used to prove that there was a problem with sediment runoff coming from Pennsylvania's dirt roads. Next slide. This was published back in 1997. It's just a cover of a very old a publication that Trout Unlimited helped put together, and it was just the beginning of the legislative effort that they used to go and petition our legislature for additional funding for the road program. Next slide. So that's how the program got started here in Pennsylvania, and it mainly, like say, from the efforts of one individual in Trout Unlimited, and that was the very beginning of it. That has funded upwards of $150 million to date in projects. Trout Unlimited is still very much involved in the program today. The task force that Bud Byron started has kind of morphed into several advisory work groups, which Trout Unlimited still has a presence on all the advisory groups. They're very much involved in the program, and particularly with streams and stream crossing policies. With their encouragement, all of the stream crossing projects that we work on are designed for, we use bank full width culverts and structures. We design them for aquatic organism passage. We have a lot of help from Trout Unlimited, training our staff with bank pool determinations, and if we have some tough projects, they'll help us with design efforts. The State Conservation in return, we help Trout Unlimited. They have an initiative going on in Pennsylvania right now where they're trying to do an assessment on pretty much every stream crossing in the state, and there are thousands of them. They do that assessment to determine which ones are priorities for replacement. And so that's the story of how Trout Unlimited was involved in our program and the efforts that they made. So I'll entertain any questions.
Outstanding, Roy. Thank you so much. Do you want to take a stab at the questions the other presenters have been addressing on the changes that you foresee with the new administration or the new farm bill things that need included?
I'll take a stab at it. So I don't have a crystal ball, but I know Mr. Trump will take office here in about 60 days and has a 100-day plan, so that would put you, what, around Memorial Day? So I think we would all know a little better where everything's going at the end of 100 days. But one thing I can see for our program in Pennsylvania, the administration wanted to focus on energy independence, and we have a lot of gas wells over here, and there's a lot of the gas well fracking trucks and drilling trucks do a lot of damage to our dirt roads. So we would probably change the priorities of some of the projects we do. If we had a project that a county could foresee, there was going to be a lot of drilling on that road, they would probably just hold off working on that road until the bulk of the drilling is done. So it might reorganize or reprioritize some of our projects for sure. Other than that, I think we just want to wait and see what happens there.
Very good. Something you need included in the Farm Bill, or a change that you would foresee or want in the Farm Bill upcoming?
I'll just wait and see what happens. I think we take a more wait and see attitude right here for now, and want to tell the gentleman how to do his job, or get in too much trouble saying how he should be doing his job. So.
Okay, very good. So with our three speakers, do enter any questions that you might have. The question that we did have is, what do you see the advantage of this working together, NGOs with local conservation districts and state agencies and NRCS from both directions? And Jim gave us a good lead into that. Leif, do you want to add to what Jim was talking about regarding the advantages and benefits? You touched upon it. You want to add to that? Hopefully I didn't lose Leif. Did I lose you, Leif? Roy, why don't you tackle that one item, which is those advantages that you've seen and this partnership between non-government and government organizations, what you've seen over the years.
Well, certainly with the partnership with Trout Unlimited, but again, we rely heavily on our local conservation districts to do this work. We couldn't do it without our local conservation districts, and the partnerships that they form too out there. So. And the townships are a big part of local government that our conservation districts interact with all the time. So I think it's important for everybody to make sure they have good education and outreach efforts, so that one entity knows what the other one's doing. That's probably the biggest key to our program success, is open communication that the conservation districts have had with the other local government entities, as well as the private sector.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute the rest of our presenters, Becky, Dane, Jason, Peter. Going to unmute any of you. Becky and Dane, that subject of working together, those benefits that you've really seen in the Dakotas and Montana of working together. Anything you'd like to add?
Thanks, Roy. Yeah, I guess in North Dakota here, in the Dakotas and Montana, working with partners has been critical to getting conservation on the ground. Everyone has something different to offer, and whatever can be brought to the table for landowners so that they can meet their goals on their property, and it works with conservation, is a great benefit to everyone.
You look to certain things for conservation districts to provide that you really need?
Conservation districts, from a waterfowl standpoint, when Conservation Reserve Program sign-up, CRP, is available, it is critical to have those conservation districts out there to be able to have the manpower to do those grass seedings. Without having the ability to get the grass seedings down on the ground, there are landowners out there who don't live in the state, or there are landowners who are just getting up in age and they don't have the equipment to do it anymore. So having them with the equipment and the manpower to do the work on the ground is absolutely necessary from our standpoint.
Yeah, very helpful. And Peter, add to this discussion this morning about the benefits of working together, the expectations you need from conservation districts or state conservation agencies. Hope I didn't lose Peter.
No, I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah, any thoughts on the benefits of working together is the question, and in particular, conservation districts' expectations you need in your work with conservation districts or state conservation agencies?
Well, good question, Ray. Thank you. Conservation districts are still a new partner for us. In fact, we had some meetings in D.C. Last month to better understand how the conservation districts work and how we can more effectively work with them. So that's still a very new one for us. We do have a fair bit of experience working at the state level with Natural Resources Conservation Service. But so far the conservation districts are a new partner for us, so anxious to learn more.
Excellent. And Jason, yours is almost obvious, but anything else that you want to add to the discussion about the benefits you've seen?
Yeah, the only thing I might add, Ray, is just, the conversation, centered around our NGOs, but you guys brought up the soil and water conservation districts, and I just want to highlight, at least here in Minnesota, how important those individuals are with providing that day-to-day support and guidance to these farm bill assistance positions. They're the ones that, in Minnesota, every county has a local water management plan, so they have their local priorities and their mission, and the partnership really not only puts people in place to help us see achievements toward their state goals, but they're also working towards achievements of local goals set forth with the counties and the FWCDs. And we're lucky here in Minnesota to have very strong soil and water conservation districts that are not only able to deliver a product on the ground with tree plantings, grass seeding, things of that nature, but they're also, trained GIS specialists, so they bring that special tool and ability to develop GIS information and maps to help aid in working with landowners, and they really are a key component to that local delivery mechanism in everything that we do.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I'm going to just give a last opportunity before we move to Mike Brown for our closing comments, but Dane and Becky, any last items for the group that you may have forgotten or wanted to add?
No, just to emphasize how important it is with these partnerships. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's kind of how conservation works today, and so we are very thankful for the close relationships that we have with public and private partners across the nation, and it makes conservation happen.
Thanks, Becky. Dane?
I guess, yeah, just thanks for the opportunity to speak on this webinar, and I think that's about all I have.
Appreciate you very much. Peter, any last notes or things you want to add?
Just a word of gratitude, and for a small organization like ours that's nationally focused and has very few staff, the organizations that are working at the state level, like those that are listening in today, are absolutely critical for us to help us understand what the local challenges are, what the local culture is, how we can be most helpful, and so just a tremendous asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. Jason, some last words for the group?
No, thank you for allowing me to present on this great partnership we have in Minnesota. A lot of these partnerships are maybe kind of going on already, just maybe not quite as formalized, and things are really accelerating by working together. And I can't say enough good things about all the partnerships that we're working with. And, you know, Pheasants Forever certainly isn't the only NGO we're working with, but it's amazing when you get everybody in a room sitting together talking about, we have conservation issues, what do we want to do to fix it? And everybody's on the same page. I think that creates a powerful message and a great step forward to addressing our resource concerns.
Very good. Thank you. Jim, some final comments?
Yeah, just to echo everybody else, thanks very much for all the partnerships we have out there, and we're excited and energized to try to find new and different ways to do things, and we'll be there at the table, and we'll try to raise money, and appreciate that side of it. One thing that I didn't mention that I just thought about, and I couldn't believe I forgot it, but there is a guide out there. It's called the 2014 Farm Bill Field Guide to Fish and Wildlife Conservation that several NGOs and conservation groups put together. So if you do a search for that, it is online in PDF form, and I know there's some hard copies floating out there. But again, it's the 2014 Farm Bill Field Guide to Fish and Wildlife Conservation. So thanks again.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And Roy, any last comment? Are you still with us?
Yeah, no, other than just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of what we're doing over here in Pennsylvania. It's good to hear some of the other programs. I got to get a hold of these guys and see where I can do some pheasant hunting now. So.
I wondered if that would come up. Appreciate you mentioning that, Roy. And the partnering, is going on. It's such an important part of what we do, and leveraging back and forth our collective time, money, and energy resources. Thanks, Roy, and thanks to all the presenters. My pleasure to then reintroduce Mike Brown, the Executive Director of NASCA, for our closing comments.
Well, thank you, Ray. And Roy, as a matter of fact, I'm leaving Thursday morning to head out to South Dakota to do a little pheasant hunting. Looking forward
man.
to it. Yeah, I know. Look, I want to thank all of our speakers. Fantastic job today, and trust me, the pleasure was all ours to have the opportunity to pick your brains and tune into your expertise. And I tell conservation district officials all over the country all the time that we're no longer doing business as usual. Our conservation delivery system is changing. There are more people involved, more stakeholders getting involved, and certainly more organizations getting involved. And it's absolutely critical that we take the infrastructure that we've built over the last 70 years through federal and state agencies as well as local conservation districts, and plug some of this local expertise through national NGOs into that game, so we're all working together toward the same goals. Fantastic job today. Ray, obviously I want to thank you and the Washington Conservation Commission for some of the software support for this webinar. I'm going to take a lot away from this. And Ray, if you have the opportunity, can you put my email back up on the screen for folks? Because
sure. Yeah.
I would be very interested in any follow-up comments or questions you may have that we can follow up for folks on. But I got a lot out of this, and in fact, folks, if you don't mind, as I talk in different places around the country, I'm going to take some of the ideas that you shared with us today and use those again in other forums. So again, thanks to everyone involved.
Thank you, Mike. That'll conclude our webinar today. We brought it in right on time, and we learned a great deal from one another. And participants, thanks so much for joining us. I'll leave Mike's email address up there for you to jot it down, and then we'll close our webinar. Thanks so much, folks.